In 2007, one company held the entire world in the palm of its hand. It wasn't Apple, it wasn't Samsung. It was a giant from a small frozen country that had achieved something no one else ever had. At its peak, this company didn't just dominate the market, they were the market. They had over 50% of the global market share. Half the mobile phones on planet Earth had their logo on the front. They were worth $300 billion. They were the pride of Finland and the undisputed kings of hardware. And then, in a blink of an eye, they were gone. By 2013, the mobile division was sold off for scraps, a fraction of its former value. If you ask the average person what happened, they will give you a simple answer. They will say the iPhone happened. They will say Steve Jobs walked onto a stage, pulled a glass rectangle out of his pocket, and killed the dinosaur. But that is a lie. It is a convenient myth we tell ourselves because it's simple. The truth is much darker. The iPhone didn't kill this giant. The giant took a gun and shot itself in the foot, repeatedly. Years before the iPhone even existed. This is the story of how Nokia actually failed. It wasn't because of a better touchscreen. It was because of fear. To understand the magnitude of this collapse, you have to remember what this brand meant. In the late 90s and early 2000s, owning a Nokia wasn't just a choice, it was the default. They were invincible. They built phones that could survive a drop from a 3-story building. They had a battery life that lasted a week. They had conquered the world through hardware excellence. And that is exactly where the problem started. When you are the king, you stop looking at the peasants. You stop worrying about what might replace you because you are too busy counting your money. Inside the company, a rot had set in. While the public saw sleek new phones, the engineers inside were screaming. The company had become a bureaucratic nightmare. They had grown so big, so fast, that they had created a management structure that paralyzed them. It was called the matrix structure. Power was spread out among so many different managers and departments that getting a simple decision made took weeks. Imagine you are a brilliant engineer at their headquarters in Finland. You come up with a revolutionary idea. Maybe it's a full touchscreen phone without buttons. In fact, Nokia engineers did develop a touchscreen tablet years before the iPad. They had the technology. But when you bring this idea to management, they don't look at the innovation. They look at the spreadsheets. They say, this is too risky. If we release this, it might hurt the sales of our current keypad phones. They were making so much money from their old technology that they were terrified of inventing the new technology that would replace it. They chose short-term profit over long-term survival. But the real cancer was the software. This is the part of the story that rarely gets told. Nokia ran on an operating system called Symbian. In the early days, Symbian was fine. But as phones became more complex, Symbian became a monster. It was old, clunky, and incredibly difficult to work with. Adding a new feature to a Symbian phone wasn't like coding an app today. It was like trying to build a skyscraper on a foundation of wet sand. By 2005, engineers knew Symbian was a dead end. They knew they needed to scrap it and start over with a modern operating system built for the internet, but management wouldn't listen. Rewriting the software would take time and money. It would mean admitting that their current crown jewel was flawed. So they kept patching it. They kept adding layers of duct tape to a crumbling wall. Then came January 9th, 2007. Steve Jobs introduces the iPhone. Now, the legend says Nokia executives panicked. But the reality is much worse. They didn't panic. They laughed. They got their hands on an iPhone, took it apart, and mocked it. They said, look, the call quality is terrible. It doesn't even have 3G. The camera is garbage. And if you drop it, it shatters. They looked at the iPhone through the lens of a hardware company. They judged it as a phone. They completely missed the fact that it wasn't a phone at all. It was a pocket computer that happened to make calls. They missed the shift from hardware to software. Nokia thought the value was in the plastic and the antenna. Apple knew the value was in the operating system and the user experience. While Nokia was obsessing over how many megapixels the camera had, Apple was building an ecosystem. The years following the iPhone launch were a slow-motion car crash. Nokia tried to respond. They released the 97, which they called the iPhone killer. It was a disaster. It was sluggish, the touchscreen was unresponsive, and the software was a nightmare to use. It shipped with bugs that shouldn't have passed quality control. This was the moment the public trust broke. People realized that the king had no clothes. But the final nail in the coffin came from the inside. In 2010, the company hired Stephen Elop from Microsoft as the new CEO. He was the first non-Fin to lead the company. He took one look at the situation and realized the house was on fire. He wrote a famous internal memo called the Burning Platform. In this memo, he told his employees a story about a man on a burning oil rig in the North Sea. The man has a choice: stay on the platform and burn to death, or jump into the freezing dark water. He jumped. Elop told the company, "We are standing on a burning platform." He admitted that they had missed the smartphone revolution. He admitted their ecosystem was dead. He was trying to wake them up, but he made a fatal mistake. The memo leaked. The entire world read it. And the world heard the CEO of Nokia saying, "Our products are garbage." Sales collapsed overnight. Why would anyone buy a Symbian phone when the CEO himself just said the platform was burning? It is known in business history as the Osborne effect, announcing your future plans so prematurely that you kill your current sales. Desperate, Elop made the jump into the freezing water. He had to choose a new operating system. He could have gone with Android, which was growing fast and was free. Google was practically begging manufacturers to use it. If Nokia had adopted Android in 2010, Samsung might not be the giant it is today. Nokia had the hardware quality and the brand loyalty to dominate the Android market. Instead, Elop chose Microsoft. He bet the entire company on Windows Phone. It was a strategic partnership that made sense on paper, two giants teaming up to fight Apple and Google. But in reality, it was two drowning swimmers grabbing onto each other. Windows Phone wasn't bad, but it was late. Too late. By the time the first amazing Nokia Lumia phones came out, the war was already over. People had already chosen their camps: iOS or Android. Developers weren't making apps for Windows Phone because there were no users, and users weren't buying the phones because there were no apps. It was a death spiral. The culture of fear had won. A study later interviewed dozens of top and middle managers from that era. They found that middle managers were terrified of telling the truth to the upper executives. They would hide bad news. They would report that development was on schedule when it was months behind. They would say the software was working when it was crashing. Top management was living in a fantasy world, fed by lies from subordinates who were afraid of getting fired. By the time the top executives realized how far behind they really were, they didn't have the time to fix it. They had burned through billions of dollars trying to catch up. In 2013, the inevitable happened. Microsoft bought Nokia's mobile phone business, the brand that had connected billions of people, the brand that had put a phone in the pocket of everyone from teenagers in Tokyo to farmers in rural India, ceased to be a phone manufacturer. The lesson of this story is not about technology, it's about success. Success is a dangerous drug. It makes you arrogant. It makes you risk-averse. It convinces you that because you won yesterday, you will win tomorrow. Nokia didn't fail because they were stupid. They employed the smartest engineers in the world. They failed because they were too successful to change. They fell in love with the way things were, instead of obsessing over the way things could be. Today, the company still exists as an infrastructure giant, but the magic is gone. The name that once defined the future is now a history lesson. It serves as a warning to every giant in every industry. No matter how big you are, no matter how much cash you have in the bank, if you stop innovating because you are afraid of losing what you have already lost. The world doesn't care about your legacy. It only cares about what you can do for it today. And in the brutal world of technology, if you aren't busy being born, you are busy dying.